Welcome back to another tutorial with rock painting. Here's an example rock. Now you're going to want to save a PSD right away and save your progress, but for your final you will turn in a rock_lastname.jpg. Alright, let's go ahead and go over the 3 different methods for rock painting, or even doing a sword or metal. I'm going to start with this first one, and that is taking a single layer and kind of planning out your colors as you go to kind of paint in a rock style. Let's go ahead and create a new layer. And of course you name this rock. Name this number 2. And so what I'm going to do is go ahead and draw out my rock. Put that over here as my base color. Go ahead and go into here and maybe do just a slightly lighter color. And let's slightly darker color. There we go. And then I would grab this highlight again. Go and get something a little bit brighter. We make this really tiny. And then we would do our edges in here. And now for these kind of edges here, you can do a little bit. You got to be careful when you're doing this back one because it's not going to be bright because of the lighting, right? So you could use maybe that same kind of color. And then we'll go ahead and grab our black. And you would paint in your grout. You kind of get the idea. You'd go through and just flush that out, erase. Erase as you need to. So with that being all on one layer, you'd have to come back and be able to touch that up. You'd have to grab that same color and then go over those areas that you didn't want to go over to fix that up. Get the idea. So that's method one, kind of using the brush and planning it out. And I usually paint all my colors on the side here. That way we know we can keep track. If you need to go back and grab a specific color, you can. All right, so method number two, still on one layer, but this is using the dodge and burn. And so what this is essentially and I control click the thumbnail here so I can select it. The dodge and burn tools are over here on the side underneath your blur and smudge. So I usually don't use a whole lot of the blur and smudge. They're not really as effective as using like the mixer brush and the dodge and burn. So we'll start with the burn because it's kind of easier. Burn as in to make darker, just like you would burn wood. So we can come in here and burn the edges. The only trick is, like, as you keep going over with strokes, it continues to actually burn more and more and more. So you got to kind of be careful with those edges. And I've got a specific brush on here, so it's choosing like the different styles right for it. So we got here we've got our dodge tool, right? And so you could come in here and add your tweaks and all that. If you're going to do any kind of edges, you would have to go over it several times. So we can bring this down. You can see to get brighter quicker, we can change it from midtones to highlights, and that's going to, and also our exposure up, and that's going to quickly get our dodge process going. So we run through, do that on our edges and clean it all up. You could even have even kind of dodge these areas where you want to be kind of like a flat angled piece of the rock. To go through and run through and do that. Alright, so now that you got that process down for method 2, you can test that out yourself. So these two, right, if you make any mistakes, you have to go back and paint them all from scratch, right? You can use the mixer brush and kind of blend things together, or dodge and burn again, right? But essentially, you have to rework it. Now, if we did everything on separate layers, so what we have here, this would make things a lot easier because we have our base layer. We then have our shadows, right? We have some highlights on top. We've got our edges, which is all the bright white edges of it. And then we've got the dark grout, which I just put on top, which you can see is covering up the terrible edges there. And that kind of really pulls that together. And the last thing that I would point out is to not forget that, right, the light is coming from this direction. So when you have a crack here, it's going to hit on this edge, whereas the shadows, the shadows are going to be coming from this direction. So we get sort of this side having those edges. To kind of illustrate this concept here, got another example here to kind of show you breaking it down, right? So you'll always have your base layer, shadows, highlights, grout, and edges. And so the way I actually paint those, I'll show you real quick, is you have your base layer. I do a new layer, control click the base layer so we can select it. You'd name it shadows, and you actually paint the exact same color. So you can't see it right now, but then I changed the blending mode to multiply, and you get that edge. And so that's the same way with shadows, right? If I actually turned it back to normal, those are my actual highlights, but you can't really see them unless if I turn the blending mode to multiply or screen. So the highlights will be screen and your shadows will be multiply. So now create your own rock, design whatever rock you'd like to, and whichever method that you would like to use. Go ahead and start painting that. I do have a couple examples just to give you an idea. Some different rocks, right? They are supposed to look kind of painterly style until you start cleaning them up. So you could kind of go for this type of look. We even have something like this, right? You can see the edges a little pixelated, but from far away it's going to start coming together. We've got like roundish style rocks that still have shadows and highlights and kind of blended in colors. Or if you wanted to do more of a brick style rock, right? Thinking about the edges and shadows and highlights, how you're going to do that. There's an example here. You could pause and take a look at that. We also have, you could start with black and white actually, and then add some color by doing like a hue and saturation, or a new layer that you apply like a brown and change the blending mode to like color. Right, so several different options that you could go about, different styles of rocks.